the invisible hand that hesitated. For generations, it was trusted to move without thinking, to respond instantly, to correct excess before anyone noticed. But one day, the invisible hand paused, and the pause itself sent shockwaves through the city. London's financial system was built on an assumption, so deep it rarely needed saying. Markets, left to themselves, would adjust, prices would signal, capital would flow, imbalance would correct itself through countless small decisions made without coordination. This belief powered centuries of confidence. It was not merely an economic theory, but a foundational conviction about how the world worked, embedded so deeply into the city's culture that questioning it felt not like intellectual inquiry, but like heresy. To understand why its hesitation mattered, we must return to a moment when markets became too refined to be noisy. Information moved faster. Models predicted outcomes sooner. Intervention smoothed volatility before it could speak. The invisible hand still existed, but it was being guided, restrained, and occasionally overridden. The accumulated weight of regulation, intervention, and institutional expectation had not eliminated the hand's function, but had changed its character, transforming it from an instinctive force into a cautious, conditional one that checked for permission before acting. At first, this felt like mastery. Fewer crashes, faster recoveries. Markets appeared calmer, more rational, more controllable. Participants learned to expect correction without pain. The hand would move, but gently. The gentleness itself became the problem, because it taught participants that correction was something done to them rather than through them. And once that lesson was internalized, the willingness to act independently atrophied. The reveal came when conditions changed and the expected correction did not arrive. Prices stayed misaligned longer than they should have. Capital hesitated instead of rushing in. Signals blurred. The hand that once acted reflexively now waited, confused by overlapping rules, safeguards, and expectations. This hesitation unsettled everyone. Traders looked for cues that never came. Institutions waited for movements that failed to materialize. No one wanted to act first. The self-correcting mechanism had become self-conscious. London was discovering something unsettling. The invisible hand had not disappeared. It had been trained to hesitate. And once markets learned to wait instead of react, the city would have to confront what happens when correction itself becomes uncertain. As hesitation spread, London's markets began behaving in unfamiliar ways. Price signals weakened. Capital no longer rushed toward imbalance. Opportunities lingered unanswered, not because they were unattractive, but because no one trusted the signal to act first. Participants watched one another more than the market itself. Each decision depended on expectations of reaction. If others waited, waiting felt rational. The invisible hand, one an aggregate of bold moves, became a mirror of collective caution. The market's intelligence, which had always depended on the diversity and independence of its participants, was being undermined by the very coordination that intervention and guidance had produced. Institutions felt the shift immediately. Models that assumed rapid correction produced conflicting guidance. Interventions designed to smooth volatility now obscured it. Markets appeared calm. But beneath the surface, alignment was drifting. The hand was present, but restrained by layers of anticipation. The danger emerged when hesitation reinforced itself. Delayed corrections became normal. Mispricing persisted long enough to reshape behavior. Capital adapted to waiting. Risk accumulated quietly, untested by small adjustments that once released pressure early. During stress, the effect intensified. When shocks arrived, markets did not absorb them quickly. They stalled. Participants expected correction to come from elsewhere, another institution, another signal, another authority. Action deferred endlessly. Each participant's rational decision to wait created an irrational collective outcome, where no correction occurred at all. Officials grew uneasy. Intervention risked distorting signals further. Inaction risked allowing imbalance to harden. The city hovered between control and passivity, uncertain which threatened stability more. London confronted a troubling realization. Markets trained to expect guidance lose the instinct to move independently. The invisible hand had not failed. It had been conditioned to pause. And as hesitation replaced correction, The city edged closer to a moment where waiting itself would become the greatest risk. The tension reached its peak when hesitation turned into paralysis. Signals appeared, but no one trusted them enough to act. Prices drifted without correction. Capital sat idle, watching itself hesitate. The invisible hand, once automatic, now required permission. The conflict sharpened during a period of mounting imbalance. Everyone could see mispricing. Everyone agreed adjustment was necessary. Yet each participant waited for confirmation that others would move first. Acting alone felt reckless. Waiting felt safe until it wasn't. Institutions discovered they had become reference points instead of participants. Markets no longer corrected independently. They looked upward for cues. When none came, uncertainty deepened. The self-regulating mechanism had transformed into a coordination problem. What had once been a distributed intelligence, drawing on thousands of independent judgments, had become a centralized dependency. Paralyzed by the same authority, it looked for direction. The breaking moment arrived when delayed correction amplified loss. A misalignment that could have been resolved early hardened into structural stress. When adjustment finally occurred, it was abrupt and costly. The hand moved, but too late and too violently. Confidence cracked. Participants realized that restraint had not prevented disruption. It had postponed it. The system had learned how to wait, but forgotten how to respond. London faced a stark realization. A market that hesitates indefinitely does not become stable. It becomes brittle. Correction delayed is correction magnified. The city now had to confront the consequence of overguidance. How do you restore instinct to a system taught to pause? The resolution came not from abandoning guidance, but from redefining its limits. London recognized that markets needed room to act imperfectly. Intervention would exist, but not as a substitute for movement. The invisible hand had to be allowed to move again. Safeguards were adjusted to step back sooner. Signals were clarified rather than overridden. Participants were reminded that correction was not failure. It was function. Small adjustments returned, releasing pressure before it accumulated. Confidence rebuilt gradually. Markets relearned how to respond without waiting for permission. The recovery was uneven and uncomfortable, as participants rediscovered skills that had atrophied during years of guided behavior. Misalignments corrected earlier. Volatility returned in manageable forms, restoring feedback loops that hesitation had erased. London absorbed a lasting lesson. A system cannot be both perfectly guided and self-correcting. When an invisible hand is watched too closely, it freezes. When trusted, it adapts. The city moved forward with a humbler approach to control. It kept oversight, but restored instinct. Correction regained its place as a process, not a threat. The invisible hand did not need to be commanded. It needed space to move, and giving it that space required something harder than control: the willingness to accept imperfect outcomes in exchange for a system that could still correct itself when perfection proved impossible. Subscribe to join the journey. The